You need to say it.
No, but yes. Hey, everybody. Happy Friday. I know usually I start at 4 o'clock. Sometimes technical difficulties happen, and this is where we are. So, happy Friday. You know, when you see Fran, it is Friday. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the podcast, it's called Fran and Friends. And the point of the podcast is to help people to find healing through self discovery. With that said, I'm so happy that I found Alignable because when I did, I ran into David Gamble. And I'm going to read who is one of our new guests. I'm going to read his background. After I share with you a little bit about his background, we're going to dive right into his life and see how we maybe can apply some of the principles that he did. So, David, welcome.
Thank you.
You're
Welcome.
welcome.
Thank you. Yes, good
All
to be
right.
here.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. So, David, he has over 30 years of engineering experience on military and commercial fixed wing and helicopters at Boeing. And currently, he's in EOS aircraft. He's at EOS aircraft as a HO design and integration and consultant on Duronian Aerospace as their chief aerospace engineer. Recently, the chief engineer for XTI Aircraft's Trifan 600 hybrid VTOL. David, what did I just say? Because I have no clue on what some of these acronyms were.
Well, the only acronym you that was the last one, which is vertical takeoff and landing,
Okay.
which is you could say helicopter, but they come in different flavors now. So
Okay.
it's not one main rotor. It could be upwards of 4 or 5 mini rotors, like on a drone size.
Okay.
That's getting more prevalent. So.
Well, thank you for sharing. So, I guess so. What does that look like in a day for you, David? But before you dive into that, can you give people a bit more, I guess, of a layman's term, what you've been up to till now, and then I'll ask more questions as we go on.
Well, I mean, if you kind of go to my history, my story, I mean, I'm in a, I graduated as an aerospace engineering. It's going on 35 years ago, back in 1989.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're kind of naive. You're kind of like, wanting to embrace the world as best as you can. Um, but, you get into the corporate life. My first struggle was getting that first job. There was a lot of competition in the late 80s into the 90s. Um, a lot of engineers in military type settings. There was a lot of money pouring into that because that was right at the end of the Cold War. And then within a year's time after graduating, I got a job, and getting that first job is always important. But within the first year, that was kind of the onset of the ending of the Cold War, like I said, and the cutting back of defense funding.
Mm.
So I was the victim of that, with being laid off within a year after graduating, or a year after graduating, and a year of being into actual industry. So, that was a shocker because as a 23-year-old, 23, 24-year-old, it was an interesting experience to understand that, a job's not guaranteed, right? Even though the guys that I was working with had been there for 20 years, 20, 30 years going on there, there's a lot more, not like hopping and going to different jobs. So that was kind of the start of it. It was kind of rocky. Well, I wouldn't say a roller coaster, more like a flat plane that's going off a cliff.
Mm-hmm.
And then being able to put, get myself up, find out what the next do. Almost went back into grad school. But I stayed in touch with the guys, at least the manager that I used to work for at the job I was just laid off from. So I have to give kudos to at least understanding, making those connections. Maybe not as much as I'm doing now, but that was kind of like the inclination of doing that and following where the job goes,
Yeah.
because that's almost even way before cell phones, way before internet to what we're expanding. So it really mattered of making sure you stayed in contact by just phone calls, right? The old
Hmm.
wired to the wired to the wall phones, and but gradually, technology uh, picked up. I moved up to Philadelphia within probably, I would say, for like 3 years of graduating college up to Philadelphia, and then basically been staying here since. I worked with Boeing for probably another 20 years. And then, between, like you mentioned, commercial helicopters, I won't go into that, but it's kind of like I felt comfortable at Boeing
Hmm.
in the first 10 years. And then I started seeing, I wouldn't say the wheels come off, but I started seeing how the business started to change, and not
Mm.
necessarily at my level, but the organizational level. And just understanding that, you know, you, you never choose, just like you never choose your parents and you never choose your boss. And, when you get a good boss, it's not like you can keep him.
Mm.
Um, and so,
Don't you
going
wish
back and
so?
forth, you know, I mean, you could pause me, but that's a good story in itself.
No,
Um,
no, no, no. I said, don't you wish though? Like sometimes when you run into good people, that help mentor you, it's like, dang, I really enjoyed that time period. And they're like, could you move with me to the next place?
yeah, I have reached back out to those folks, later on at like 98, 99. I had a very good manager,
Hmm.
but when I went back to him, it, I don't know if he was um, just a situation he was in. He'd already gone through his second marriage.
Mm.
So to be a role model, it wasn't a good one.
Mm.
So professionally, he was a good mentor. But personally, I really didn't get to see much of that.
Mm.
So mentor being just from a technical perspective or career perspective
Yeah.
has half the story.
Yeah.
And too much in my early career was trying, and this is kind of my journey and story as far as identifying as a corporate engineer. And what I mean by that is that my identity was attached to my job.
Yo, that is such a great subject. Let's talk about that because a lot of people don't know how to separate that. And I've done the same thing as well. Like, at one point, did you identify that your identity was your job and your job was your identity? And then when did you get the wake up call when you realize that, oh, I don't have to subscribe to this particular thing, to this label?
Um, Probably later in my career, because every couple of years I would always move to a different project.
Hmm.
So I always thought that maybe, and this was also reinforced by the company, because I also got some kind of like management training. And one of the underlying mantras that everybody was speaking is that, oh, you can't stay in a job for more than 2 years or you're dead, right? You're dead in your career.
Hmm.
And this was, I can't remember if it's actually stated anywhere in the class or the training, but you got that sense from talking to folks that their mentors would tell them, um, in a roundabout way, if you expect to climb the ladder, don't expect to have a job for more than 2 years. If you get a job, always look for the next one.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's when I started to realize that I maybe not realize it, but just realize that if it's kind of like that musical chairs game where where they you play the musical chairs and they take a chair away. It's kind of that. And if I kept on moving every 2 years, going to a different project, it's when I got to that point in my career and my age where they wouldn't give me that next promotion because I knew too much, or my breadth of knowledge from their perspective, I cost too much for the new program.
Oh, wow.
So that's when I started I wasn't necessarily realizing it. I think I realized it early on, but it wasn't a pain point.
Okay, okay.
So when I started realizing that they would not set me in a position, or the positions in in those new projects were limited. So there was a larger pool and a smaller number of projects.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like musical chairs. So I was left out because somebody already sat down,
Wow.
and so and they would just look at you like, well, I can't do anything. All right, well then what's going on. And then I started reading the tea leaves that you always look at the forecast for, well, what's the next project come down the pike. There wasn't any,
Wow.
or it was very limited, or it was very limited in scope, or it didn't mount to much, or I didn't know the right folks within those departments because I was dealing more with the products being delivered to the customers, so I
Oh,
didn't have
so it's
that.
like they were keeping you at a distance, not really in the administrative portion, but they were keeping you like in the working and the labor portion, so you couldn't have the appropriate conversation with those that were actually moving the needle.
Right. So when I started to break out and try to be more, I guess, entrepreneurial
Yeah,
within the commercialization, the company,
yeah,
and start to work for different projects that were outside of my location,
yeah.
kind of like trying to do my own remote work, way
Hmm.
before it was actually a thing. It was shunned upon, but just because of the way the business was set up. So a site would be so tied to the projects that are at the site, the deliverables at the site. That was the money driver for those
Mm,
sites. And if you're not in part embedded in those, you're kind of like not recognized.
wow.
And so that the way they started to create that um, really started to show me that I wasn't going to be here for much longer.
Mm,
And so come 2014, that's when I kind of got that pain point where I needed to do something different. And now I went on to work on another project at another company within Philadelphia, but I always knew in the back of my mind this wasn't going to last long,
mm.
because they don't use the age any to any certain extent in business. They've gotten real tact, almost like PR,
They don't use the
whitewashing.
age or age.
Age,
Okay, age. Okay,
age and experience, because experience means dollars to the financiers.
okay.
So that became, if they could get somebody who was more energetic and more skilled set, or at least maybe energetic but not necessarily experienced, they would tend to pivot to that. And I
Yeah,
and I
but
and I from a business perspective, I don't see that as a fallacy, but to always do that and not recognize the folks that already brought you here.
yeah,
um,
wouldn't you think that that's more expensive? Because I used to work for somebody who always wanted to do like shortcuts with projects. And when the projects had went not in the direction that it should have, because they didn't utilize like the quality material or the specifications that I was requesting, or the advice of those who actually did it, they ended up paying more for the project because they didn't have the foresight, they didn't have the experience.
Yeah. The 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 there was also well, the other thing I was noticing was a mindset change at the um,
Did you say
I would
mind
say
shuts?
sea level, the corporate offices,
Mm-hmm.
like division heads and VPs, and they were more financially driven.
Okay.
So I think before, when I got into the business, it was more driven by engineers who understood the process, and that we deliver products because people build them.
Right.
There was this I call it the Jack Welch effect, and then what I mean by that is Jack Welch was the one that steered GE um, to financial gain,
Mm-hmm.
but for the long term, in the last few years, there's no longer a GE.
Mm.
There's only GE Aviation. That's the only thing that's remnants of the GE name, and they had that same path. And what had happened, the proteges from Jack Welch went into other industries, including Boeing and McDonnell Douglas, who, there's a whole story under that. But just their mindset of going to the lowest dollar. Uh, I mean, Jack Welch even kidded the best way of get away from taxes and labor was basically to be on an island or
Mm.
on a where he could control the wages,
Got it.
because he wouldn't be taxed.
So
He wouldn't have to
outsourcing.
worry about government's oversight. And he kind of touted it, and he always, that's when kind of when the work in the late 90s into 2000s, where it started going over to Asia and lower wage markets,
Yeah.
really drove it hard. Going to Mexico or going to Canada because they're lower wages than the U.S.
Yeah.
That that's what drove everybody. It was always short term profit, not long term prosperity.
Mm. I
And
like that.
right, so that's that when you put in just people are called bookkeepers, right?
Mm.
Or we call them bean counters. All they count was the beans. Okay, this guy costs this much. Didn't care about their family or the community that they're funding.
Yeah.
They're more worried about, okay, what are we going to hit our quarter marks?
Right.
Are we going to return the profit back to the shareholders?
Mm.
That's that. Maybe a result in now the '80s, where you had Wall Street barons and stuff, people basically hedging their bets, and there still are now. And don't get me wrong, but I think we're at an apex where that needs to swing back the other way.
Yeah, I was thinking that, like, all right, if you're trying to create something that's sustainable, right? And you have like these quarterly goals that you have to meet, there's only so many resources that you can tap into until that thing needs to be created either synthetically or grown in a way that, like, nature has this process of things that it grows in.
Right,
And
right,
so if nature is going in a certain way and then you're superseding that, there's something missing,
right.
or
Well,
we're destroying the natural flow of the cycle.
correct. And it was more incentivizing for the senior leaders if they saw a shortcut, because a lot of times these are all shortcuts. They didn't want
Hmm.
to do the hard stuff.
Hmm.
And when you get a big company and they want, this goes back to kind of like the problems we're having with social media.
Mm,
People want to stand out, and they think if they're so vulgar or so um, out in left field, they'll get recognized.
yeah.
That's that same mentality, because they don't want to do the work. And this goes back to my personal journey also too. Is I had to think about myself not as a corporate engineer, but just as David the engineer.
Okay.
And re-identify myself as, I'm not going to settle for X, Y, or Z just because they have, you know, 10 times the dollars. It has to be the people I'm going to work with. It has to be, are they, are they, are they willing to give back to the community? Are they willing to put the right performance measures in place where it's not about that quarter? It's about the long-term health of not only the business but also the people, because without the business, I mean, without the people, there is no business, right? Without
Yeah.
the customers that the people that the your employees support, there's no business,
Yeah.
right? So I
Yeah.
started identifying that, and a lot of engineers don't recognize it this way, is that we all have to market it or something, whether it be a product or
Yep.
whether it be ourselves when we're marketing ourselves for a job.
I feel like we had this conversation, David.
No, it's fundamental. I mean, it's you start looking at it and said, huh, why wasn't this taught, when I was growing up, and even in college, I mean, they taught you about finance, keeping the books, supply and demand, but they never taught you about, and maybe they are now, I don't know, about
Personal
um,
skills.
personal
Or,
skills,
or per,
self reliance,
yes.
um,
Yeah.
and even some engineers I've talked to a few, and a lot of them don't recognize that. They rather just go to the next role or company, and looking for something they can't find.
Mm,
Right. So that's my journey, and it's not ended. Right. It's always ongoing. Um, yeah. I mean, for if that's where I could end it, but I think right now it's kind of like, not only do I have the positions you were talking about, we also have our own online business, and we look at it as revenue, and it's kind of like always, well, what can I do, today that will um, make us more prosperous tomorrow,
for sure.
right?
So, before we get into your business, G&G Design dot life, I wanted to ask, like, I know you had mentioned like certain things that you experienced. What are maybe one or two key lessons that you learned? And if you could give an example where you had to, I know you mentioned, you looked and you saw, okay, hey, this behavior is happening. But like, was there something pivotal that occurred? If you could share a story of how your professional and personal growth came to be to where you are today.
Um, I really, I mean, it's not necessarily probably when the kind of the inflection points I always go to is probably when I was given the layoff notice from Boeing,
Mm-hmm.
and how I was more calm and collected than my bosses were.
Mm.
Um,
Why?
I What's that?
I said, why were you more calm and collective?
Because I going back to when I mentioned I was laid off back in, my 1 year out after that, it was very detrimental to me, and the reason why I say that, so I have to tie these together because one story by itself doesn't tell the whole thing. So when I was um, basically, I was given a kind of a notice right before Christmas, that there was a possibility if the government went one way or another that I wouldn't have a job come the new year. Well, new kid, there's probably not going to be anything bad about it. So I went up to my brother's family was in Virginia, just south of DC. So I stayed with them for the holidays. Right after, and I think I stayed through the New Year's. So right after that, they made the announcement. Well, I'd already started my travel back because I was driving up there. So um, and I think my parents called me up when I got to the hotel because I think I stayed somewhere in Tennessee. I forget what exactly it was. Um, I called them up and they said, "Well, we got this notice," and I was so panicked that I drove the rest of the way home after that. Um, so me kind of like turning the tables on that episode, saying I'd never do that again. that's I would never contemplate or um, let negativity uh, get me down for too long. That was a determination on my part to uh, take control, is basically what it is, and not let the circumstances dictate how I'm going to respond to it. It will be like, okay, that's it. Now let's do this. And it took me. I mean, it took a while, and I would say that it's kind of like those hurdles or that exercise that you do. You get better over time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so, it would, that was kind of like a few days it took me to get over that. The next time is probably maybe a day or so, and to the point where if it happened, that's when that 2014 came around. How I could be more calm because why are you guys concerned? You're the guys that didn't stand up for me. I'm not going to apologetically understand or apologize or I mean, more or less forgive them,
Yeah.
right? But they didn't forgive themselves because they don't understand.
So how did you stay grounded? I know that you mentioned that it took you a couple of days to get over it. What was your mindset in that mind frame when you're like, "Oh, hey, you're dwelling in this space for a little bit too long." Like, what were you thinking at the time to get out of that
Panic.
funky
I
space?
mean, the earlier when I was younger, panic
Hmm,
that there was no future,
hmm,
and I was by myself, and to 2014, two things. I was married for over well like 15 years, and I had a 2-year old.
hmm.
So your mindset is totally different. Your perspectives are totally different. You can't rest on your laurels. You can't rest on your emotions. You got to put those aside and think about the others that are in your family. Right? You
Hmm.
got to think about the family. So that's what really drove me.
Okay.
Something fighting for something other than yourself, because you sobbing or you I mean, I did when I kind of got the notice and stuff. I talked with my wife, and we had a long discussion. And just talking it out improves it. Uh,
Hmm.
and I
Awesome.
remember that, and and it gets to the point where I says, I can't look at, I can't take corporations at their word.
Hmm.
I can't take a contract at their word because I don't like this idea that you write a contract to a company. You write a contract between two people, and if one of the people leave, it's kind of like a partnership.
Yeah.
It's hard to have a relationship with a company because it is fictitious,
Hmm.
and it's only as good as what you think of it, right? How good it is, and when it goes sour, the company becomes sour.
Hmm.
So that's when I started driving to, looking at the people in the eye and starting to recognize that. Um, it's almost like I started to recognize um, the little voice in me that I wasn't listening to when I was younger.
Hmm.
To recognize when I'm being, or maybe it's just because of being wise, I guess, over time. But I start, it's kind of like your gut feeling, and your gut feeling doesn't really help you until you get a lot of gut punches. And and then you start to
Experience.
realize, I don't want to be punched again, and this feels like another episode of a gut punch. Or you've calculated in your head, the gut punch is probably like 20%, or maybe this 50% or 70%, and if it's above 50, I'm going like, it ain't worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
So I don't know if that answered it or if
No, you totally did, David, because I mean, I like that you walked us through the journey because, like, sometimes people aren't really aware of what they're feeling, what that experience is out loud. I mean, they feel it, but maybe they can't identify what that is. And so you sharing that, I
Yeah,
think it's helpful.
it's kind of like this doesn't feel right, and you kind of look at you second no not second guess, but you, you kind of take yourself out of the picture and saying, okay, so if this and this happened, are they doing the right thing for me?
Mm,
Right. And if they're doing it for just for themselves, if as long as the paths are on the same path, it'll work out.
yeah.
But if their path is different from mine, then I know it's not going to work out.
I mean, even if everybody has a different path, nobody will have the same answer or direction that they're going, which is great because this is what life is about. Okay, well, this part of your life, I could take this information. This part, not so much. I can grab this from somewhere else. Well, like we're all an interweave story, you know? So if I don't need it, I don't need it. You know how they say, take what is applicable to you and leave the rest.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah. So now that you've pivoted into this new space of you're still working, but like you said, you wanted to create a more sustainable future for you and your family. G&G Design Life. Tell me what you guys do there. What do you how does that help you with you creating wealth for
Well,
you and your family?
it's twofold. It's just talking to folks, talking more or less to engineers or other career professionals who are still in that corporate mindset, but feel like they're not in the right place,
Yeah.
and trying to help them figure out, how to become their own boss,
Okay.
right? And that's one of the first things I start with, because I have an affiliated marketing company that I work with, which really helped me in the transition from basically a company perspective, or a corporate employee, to kind of a self-guided person. I wouldn't call myself self-employed. I'd call myself more of a, trying to look for that process to be able to create our own business.
Okay.
So, but just finding those people who want to do something different, right? Trying
Okay.
to find somebody who was like me maybe 10 years ago, that's looking for something that they just don't know what it is, and I'm willing to set a path to make find out, you know, have they tried other options, right? Have they tried, maybe it's not in the path that they laid before them,
Mm-hmm.
and if they keep going that way, they're just going to be miserable,
Mm.
and maybe then they need to switch up or um, do something different, right? And by all means, there's a lot of people out there that are still lost, and nobody's there to handhold them, to say,
Mm-mm.
hey, you can do something different. You're not stuck with what you have, but you need to think differently. So,
Okay.
um, that's kind of a, basically it. I mean, we have, some other businesses where we have online. I'd still do, like I said, the consulting for engineering, and also, work at a regular job that fits my personality,
Okay.
or fits me, not the other way around. So,
Okay.
um,
So what do you guys do at G&G Design Life? Are you consulting or how is that helping other people to
well, it's
build wealth for
consulting, and
themselves?
it's basically saying, one of the things I have on my website right now is, what are the signs that tell you that you need to start your own business yesterday?
Uh-huh.
And so there's like, a few points on there that kind of help you out to determine that.
Okay.
I
So
actually
are
have
they doing like an assessment of some sort? Like when they go on
no.
your
It's
website?
kind of like it's kind of like the questions, like, um, you know, are you up? I mean, it's kind of like questions you need to answer before you figure out that you're not in the right spot. So, like, do you feel like you're not going anywhere? Do you feel like you're fitting in? Are you upset with the people you work for? Um, No, I mean, but
No, I'm
not
laughing
necessarily.
because I'm thinking like there's so many things that are applicable in the workplace. It's like you'll always find somebody you're not
But
fond of.
that is true. But the other thing is that, like I mentioned before, if it's not painful enough, they're
Right.
not willing to change. Right. So they may say that, but it's not to the point where they can't get something else. Right. So they say,
Yeah.
okay, I'll just go over here. It'll be better. And then 2 years later, in the same spot again,
Mm,
or a year later, they're the same spot again.
mm,
And they keep on It's kind of like the phrase, "It's greener on the other side." Never is. It
mm.
looks good, and most of the times businesses attract you to the shiny object, and you
It's a
go to the shiny
mirage.
object, and it's a turd, right? I mean, I have to say that it's a turd.
It's a shiny turd.
It's been polished, and it looks shiny, but it's not,
That's a
right?
reflection.
So, yeah, so it's that, trying to get people to recognize that, and you kind of walk yourself through that. Then once I get them through that, then you got to then it goes into, well, okay, so a lot of people are more afraid of starting their own business because nobody's ever taught them that, right?
Right.
It's not somebody you can get a self-help book on a business, because you got to ask yourself, well, what do you want to sell? Um, and it really comes down, like I mentioned before, it doesn't come down to what you're selling. You just have to believe in it,
Mm,
right? And
yeah.
if you don't believe in yourself,
Yeah.
how's somebody else going to believe in you?
Whew. Word, word, word.
So that's why that's kind of basically what it's. I would not say it's a life coach. It's just it's just a way of talking with folks, see if you're in the right fit, because it's kind of like that gut check. I'm starting to feel people out as far as, okay, seems like you're not ready. Maybe 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 I give you a couple months just to stay in touch and
Yeah.
seeing when are you ready, and realizing that it's not your time. Because I have come across that. Granted, age comes wisdom, but it's probably was taught to me when I was younger, and it just didn't click.
Mm,
So it's getting people at the right point in their lives to understand that that's not for you.
yeah. So
Um,
just was on the website and I was looking um up gngdesign.life, and so you said that it's more of a like more of like first you just want a consultation to see if they fit or if they're ready for the transition. Is that what I'm hearing? And then
yeah, it's
what
more of
type
a
of services
transition,
are
kind
you
of,
offering?
right. So it's kind of that um, way post, or kind of like a I have to say it,
The like yeah, like a
signpost saying,
signpost.
"Are you ready?"
Yeah,
If you're ready, or you think you're ready, we can talk and see, is are you ready to go in that direction? And if not, we can have a good chat and send you off on your whatever you feel comfortable with. I mean, I can't convince everybody,
right.
and people are stubborn. Um, but if they're truly at that point where they've tried everything, and the pain point is high enough, and they're willing to give it a shot, I'm willing to help.
Okay. So like when they do sign up and you find out that they are good candidates, what kind of business are they offering to others once they do?
Well, it's pay. You always pay it forward. So anybody who's gone through it, it's kind of like once you get to that point and you realize, kind of like my journey is, pay it forward, right? Tell your story, right?
Yeah, I
It's a
guess I was
testimonial.
unclear as to what kind of services that you're offering because that's what I wanted the people to know so they can, have an idea. Oh, okay, maybe I do want to do. Are you consulting? Are you providing services? Is
Well,
it a
it's
product?
products. I mean, once we get into that, then it's products, selling through, like I said, affiliated marketing.
Oh, okay, okay.
And then I would there's a whole other mechanism, or whole other mindset of training you for that. um, transition to um, being believe in yourself and believe in the products you have.
Yeah.
Um, and so once you establish that, then that's where it gets into, um, I'm not, I'm kind of like affiliated marketing and also franchising.
Yeah.
It becomes you if you're not successful, I'm not successful. So there's no financial investment that a person needs to make. The
Okay.
only investment is they need to invest in themselves,
Okay.
and I'm there to help them to have that investment.
Okay.
Um,
So when you say affiliated marketing, for those that are watching for the first time, may not be familiar with affiliate marketing, could you share that what that
well,
means?
affiliated marketing is, and you've probably seen it as some products are sold online, as shown on TV,
Yeah.
or there's the only web-based products. I mean, Herbalife comes to mind, but they're a bad example. The one we have is a company called Amway that's been around for 60 years. They started as a soap company,
Mm-hmm.
so their products they have like over 300 products. So they have a multitude of products. I use almost all of them or most of them on a
What is
daily
Lamway's
basis.
focus?
What's that?
What is Lamway's focus?
Amway's focus is well in different markets. They have wellness, which is Neutralite. They have supplements. They have Access, which is drinks and other um, workout um, edibles. Then they have cleaning products for the house. They have air treatment systems that we have in our house to keep, you know, um, make sure you're breathing stuff in, unless you become your own filter. Um, they have um, they have water treatment systems,
Okay.
a whole host. I mean, I could go through it, but the basic ones are, and also artistry. It's not necessarily cosmetics; it's skincare. So
Okay.
it's not necessarily it's just making sure your skin's healthy. So
Okay.
it's an overall body experience to make sure your internals, which is supplements, and then um, externals for the skin. Make sure because the
Cool.
skin is another organ, believe it or not.
Right. No,
So
it is. I think my hydrocolon therapist talks about like there are like 5 ways that our body excretes, and our skin is one of them. Our eyes, our mouth, of course, our
yes,
our pelvic area. So, thank you for sharing that, David. So, for those that are watching, what is a few key points of advice that you want to leave them, that helped you to transition in your career?
um, the first key point is you have to believe in yourself, or you have to believe in somebody else. That's always difficult when you don't believe in yourself. It's kind of hard to believe somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, don't always believe in a company
Mm.
because too many times I've seen people in management hide behind a company and saying, "Oh, the company did that." Well, no, people did that.
Mm.
So don't believe everything you hear.
Okay.
Um, but you still have, but believe in the idea, but don't believe in it's kind of like question. You got to question everything and always be curious.
Mm.
Would be another point I would say.
I like
Um,
that.
right,
ABC.
right, and then another other key points is you know you know get a self help book, read a book,
Mm.
read a autobiography. I've read a lot of autobiographies probably in the last 10 years, and I've read in the first probably 35 years of my life, and I wish I did it sooner because autobiographies give you that also give
Insight.
me self-confidence because now I can say, "Oh, they did that. Oh,
Mm.
that's what came of that." Um,
What's
but,
one autobiography you would recommend?
um, Well, there's several, and there's ones that have their own specifics, but I guess the one that really kind of um, brought me to the fact of how people can be successful is probably Steve Jobs.
Okay.
He was a very layered person, but he was very determined.
Mm,
And a lot of times people interpret that as arrogance.
mm.
But I think he has a vision, and and I know there's probably, I'm trying to remember if it was one of the people in the Bible to have that as well. I think it was Nehemiah. I forget what it was. I have to go back and look. But basically have the vision and already know what it's going to look like, and
Oh.
then be dogged about it to get it
Mm-hmm.
there.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have that determination that no matter what somebody else says, just do it.
Mm.
And I actually, there's a quote that I heard the other day, and it kind of summarizes what I'm saying. It says, if you live in the opinion, and if you live in their opinion, you're due to you die in your rejection.
Could you read that again?
It said, if you live in their
David, you
opinion,
get a little bit closer to
you
the mic, though.
you die in die in your rejection.
Mm. If you
So
live in their opinion, you die in their rejection.
no, you die in your rejection. So
Oh,
in other words, if you live in their opinion, so if somebody has opinion of you, you die in your rejection of that, of under your own rejection of that opinion.
wow. If you live in their
Live in their
opinion, you
opinion.
die in
So
your
you
rejection.
die a rejection.
Wow.
It's almost like, it's the same way as saying, on your deathbed, if you have a regrets, well, start thinking about that now and make sure you don't have any rejection.
Yo, your whole light and stuff changed when you said that. But that's so crazy because the first thing that I thought of is like, was a rejection, but like people not honoring themselves.
Well,
Yeah.
not believing in themselves, right? So
Yeah.
they
Same thing.
accept
Yeah.
that they live in that person's somebody else's opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, I could equate that as a metaphor for me and the company, right?
Yeah.
I live in their opinion that I am
Right.
an engineer of the corporation, and I'll die in my own rejection
Yeah.
because I did not beholden to myself.
Yeah. But now you're engineering your own life.
Exactly.
So I like that. Well, David, where can people find you?
Well, they can find me at the website www.gngdesign.life, and they can
Okay.
book a consulting time with me. They can easily find me on LinkedIn, under my name, Gamble, uh, David Gamble. So, and yeah, I'd start with the website.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you for joining us today. And as always, I appreciate your time, the conversation, your wisdom. And yeah, I'm so glad that we crossed each other's paths.
I am too, Fran. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you're welcome. Hold on just a second, David. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for Fran and Friends. The YouTube video is already available. So if you want to watch it again, you know where to find me. All right, everybody. Happy Friday.
Hey, bye. Happy Friday.